the bold, and the beautiful is no stranger to familial betrayal. The Forrester, Logan, and Spencer dynasties have been built on a foundation of boardroom coups, stolen glances, and secrets that fester across generations. But in the spring of 2026, the show delivered a storyline so insidious, so deeply personal, that it redefined the meaning of the word manipulation. This wasn't a corporate takedown or a love triangle born of passion. This was a cold, calculated dismantling of a young woman's heart, orchestrated by the very person who is supposed to protect it. The saga of Ivy Forrester, the hidden letter, and the systematic destruction of Electra's relationship with Will Spencer stands as one of the most disturbing psychological thrillers the show has produced in recent memory, a slow-burn descent into madness disguised as maternal concern. The story begins with a picture of innocence. Electra Forrester, Linnea Grace, the sweet-natured, artistic daughter of the rarely seen John Forrester Jr., arrived in Los Angeles with stars in her eyes and a hopeful heart. She was quickly swept up in a genuine, whirlwind romance with Will Spencer, Crew Morrow, the handsome, earnest son of media mogul Bill Spencer. Their connection was immediate and pure, a rarity in the cynical world of high fashion and corporate warfare. They were the new, it couple, a pairing that reminded longtime viewers of the early, uncomplicated days of Ridge and Caroline or Thorne and Macy. But lurking in the background, watching with a smile that never quite reached her eyes, was Electra's aunt and guardian, Ivy Forrester, Ashley Brewer. Ivy's return to the Forrester fold had initially seemed like a homecoming. Reinstated as the head of the jewelry division, she brought Electra with her, presenting her as a fresh-faced addition to the family legacy. But the aunt was hiding a deep, pathological obsession. To Ivy, Electra was not merely a niece. She was a project, a doll to be molded, and, most importantly, a possession to be protected at all costs. When Will Spencer entered the picture, Ivy saw a threat. She didn't see a kind young man who adored her niece. She saw a distraction, a variable she couldn't control, and eventually, an enemy to be eliminated. The first cracks in the facade appeared with the arrival of Dylan, Sydney Bullock, a troubled young woman whom Will, in a gesture of genuine kindness, allowed to stay at his beach house to help her get back on her feet. To a rational observer, Will's actions were a testament to his character. To Ivy, Dylan was the perfect weapon. She began a campaign of subtle gaslighting, whispering in Electra's ear about the impropriety of Will living with another woman. She fueled Electra's existing insecurities, stemming from a previous trauma involving Luna Nozawa, transforming a benign act of charity into a perceived emotional affair. Electra, vulnerable and trusting of her aunt, began to doubt the very foundation of her relationship. This is where Ivy's scheme shifted from passive manipulation to active sabotage. In a move that stunned viewers, Ivy physically intercepted a deeply personal, heartfelt letter that Electra had written to Will. In the note, Electra poured out her soul, explaining her fears and her love, essentially giving Will a roadmap to understanding her pain and saving their relationship. It was a plea for connection, but it never reached him. Ivy stole the letter, hiding it away like a trophy, letting Electra believe that Will had simply ignored her most vulnerable moment. The devastation on Electra's face when she thought Will had rejected her confession was the first crack in her spirit. With Will now cast as the villain in Electra's eyes, Ivy moved to the next phase of her plan, the replacement. She began aggressively pushing her niece toward R.J. Forrester, Brian Nicoletti, her cousin. The irony was breathtaking. Ivy had spent weeks condemning Will for the improper situation of having a platonic female houseguest, yet she saw no issue with encouraging a romantic relationship between two blood-related cousins. It was a glaring hypocrisy that the audience latched onto, a clear sign that Ivy's motivations were never about morality or protecting Electra's reputation, but about total control. As one critic noted, Ivy's mindset was laughable, disgusting, and stupid, yet the character pursued it with the fervor of a zealot, blind to the incestuous optics of her machinations. The most chilling aspect of Ivy's villainy was her voyeurism. In a scene ripped from a psychological horror film, Ivy lurked in the shadows of the Forrester mansion while RJ and Electra shared a romantic evening. As RJ flirted with Electra, daring her to go skinny dipping and eventually settling for a swim in her suit, Ivy watched from the staircase. She clutched the stolen letter, the symbol of Electra's true love, in her hands, a physical manifestation of the lie she was forcing upon her niece. A creepy smile spread across Ivy's face as she watched Electra laugh with RJ, believing her plan was working. The camera lingered on her expression, transforming her from a meddling aunt into a full-blown antagonist, a puppet master pulling strings from the darkness. But Ivy was not content to simply let events unfold naturally. She craved the kill. Knowing that Will was still hopelessly in love with Electra and hoping for a reconciliation, Ivy decided to detonate a bomb that would leave no chance of repair. During that same evening, she seized the opportunity to snatch Electra's unattended phone. With cold, calculated precision, Ivy posted a suggestive selfie of Electra and RJ, the two of them in swimwear from their date, to her social media, ensuring it would be seen by their entire world. The digital grenade landed with devastating accuracy. Will and Dylan, who were sharing a quiet, platonic evening at the beach house, both received the alert. The image shattered Will. He stared at the photo of the woman he loved, seemingly on a romantic getaway with another man, and his remaining hope evaporated. The irony was palpable. He was being accused of moving on with Dylan, while the evidence suggested Electra had done exactly that. Dylan, who had been harboring genuine feelings for Will, saw her opening. She comforted him, whispering that it was finally their time, and in a moment of anguish, Will pulled her into a passionate embrace. The split screen that ended the episode, Electra pining alone for Will at the mansion while Will moved on with Dylan at the beach house, was a masterful piece of visual storytelling, a tragedy where both lovers were victims of a conspiracy they couldn't see. What makes Ivy's betrayal so profound is the layered nature of her crimes. It wasn't just one act of cruelty, it was a sustained campaign of psychological warfare. She surveilled Will's home, blackmailed him over perceived indiscretions, and intercepted his communications. She systematically isolated Electra from anyone who might offer a differing perspective, positioning herself as the sole arbiter of her niece's happiness. And when a potential witness, Daphne Walton, stumbled upon the truth, catching Ivy hiding the incriminating letter, Ivy simply threatened her into silence, demonstrating a willingness to escalate her crimes to maintain her grip on Electra's life. The hidden letter, therefore, becomes more than just a plot device. It serves as the narrative's central artifact of stolen truth. It represents the future Ivy stole from Electra and Will, a future where communication could have healed their rift, where understanding could have triumphed over jealousy. Its existence, hidden away like a relic of a life that was murdered in its infancy, is a ticking time bomb. Spoilers suggest that the truth is on the verge of exploding. Daphne, now married to Carter Walton, is positioned to become the conduit of justice, likely revealing Ivy's theft to the Forrester patriarchs. When Rich Forrester learns that Ivy sabotaged his daughter-in-law's relationship and manipulated the family for her own twisted ends, the consequences will be swift and severe. Ivy's fate is already being written in the spoilers. In a desperate final gambit to destroy Dylan, she is rumored to escalate from emotional manipulation to actual corporate espionage, planning to plant stolen jewelry from the Forrester Creations safe in Dylan's bag to have her fired. This move, however, will likely be the one that finally unravels her. By turning to theft and framing, Ivy moves from the gray area of protective aunt to the black and white territory of criminal. When her scheme is exposed, and on a soap opera it always is, she won't just lose her job, she will lose her family. The narrative is barreling toward a reckoning where Ivy will be forced to confront the reality that her actions didn't save Electra, they destroyed her. The devastation wrought upon Electra is immeasurable. She was manipulated by the one person she trusted implicitly. She was convinced her true love had abandoned her, and she was steered into the arms of a cousin under false pretenses. When the truth inevitably comes out, that Will never received her letter, that their breakup was engineered, that her aunt was the architect of her misery, Electra's world will shatter for a second time. But this shattering will be different. It won't be the grief of a lost love. It will be the profound trauma of realizing that her reality was a lie, constructed by a woman she loved. The path forward for Electra will be one of rebuilding, not just her relationship with Will, if it can be salvaged, but her fundamental sense of trust in the world. In the grand tradition of the bold and the beautiful, the storyline of Ivy's hidden letter serves as a cautionary tale about the destructive nature of control disguised as love. It explores the dark side of familial devotion, asking the question, what happens when protection becomes possession? Ivy Forrester began this arc as a legacy character returning to the fold, but through her actions, she has become one of the show's most complex and chilling antagonists, a woman who burned down her niece's happiness to keep her warm. And as the truth inches closer to the surface, viewers are left to wonder, when the final revelation comes, will there be anything left of Electra's spirit to save? The hidden letter is about to be found, and when it is, it won't just expose a truth, it will unleash a storm of fury, heartbreak, and consequences that will ripple through the Forrester, Spencer, and Logan families for years to come. The storm that had been brewing for months finally broke on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in the Forrester Creations executive suite. What began as a routine meeting to discuss the upcoming jewelry line launch descended into the kind of volcanic family confrontation that the bold and the beautiful does better than any show on television. The truth about Ivy Forrester's hidden letter did not emerge through a dramatic confession or a tearful apology. It emerged, as so many devastating truths do, through the smallest crack in a carefully constructed facade, a crack that would ultimately bring the entire edifice of Ivy's deception crashing down. Daphne Walton, Crystal Nguyen, the Forrester Creations public relations director who had been promoted into a role of increasing prominence, had been carrying the weight of Ivy's secret for weeks. The burden was destroying her. Every time she passed Electra in the hallway, every time she watched Will Spencer walk past the Forrester building with that hollow, haunted look in his eyes, every time she saw RJ Forrester smiling at Electra, unaware that the foundation of their burgeoning relationship was built on stolen words and manipulated emotions, each moment added another stone to the weight on her chest. Daphne had not asked to be a keeper of secrets. She had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, walking past the Forrester mansion's guest room when Ivy had carelessly left the door slightly ajar. She had seen Ivy holding a letter, a single sheet of paper covered in Electra's distinctive handwriting, the edges crumpled from being read and reread. She had seen the expression on Ivy's face as she tucked it into a leather-bound journal, not guilt, not shame, but satisfaction. The image had burned itself into Daphne's memory. For weeks, Daphne wrestled with what to do. She was not a Spencer or a Forrester by blood. She was an employee, a woman who had worked hard to earn her place in the Forrester hierarchy. Exposing Ivy, a Forrester by birth and a department head, could cost her everything. But there was another force at play that would ultimately tip the scales: her marriage to Carter Walton Lawrence St. Victor. Carter, the Forrester Creations chief operating officer, had watched Will Spencer grow from a boy into a young man. He had seen the light in Will's eyes when he talked about Electra, and he had watched that light die in the weeks following their breakup. He had also noticed something else: Ivy Forrester's uncharacteristic involvement in Electra's personal life, her constant presence, her whispered conversations, her watchful eyes. Carter's legal mind, trained to spot inconsistencies in motives, had begun to form a theory that he shared with no one except his wife. "Something doesn't add up," he told Daphne one night, his voice low and troubled. "Ivy is acting like a woman with something to protect. The question is, what?" The answer came during the quarterly jewelry division presentation. The executive suite was filled with the usual suspects: Ridge Forrester, Torsten Kay. At the head of the table, Eric Forrester, John McCook, seated in his customary position of elder statesman, Steffi Forrester, Jacqueline McInnes Wood, taking notes on her tablet, and Carter reviewing the financial projections. Ivy was presenting her proposed collection for the upcoming season, a line she had titled Eternal Bond, which she described with a knowing smile as inspired by the unbreakable connections that define this family. The irony was so thick, it was almost suffocating. Electra sat in the corner of the room, sketching ideas in a leather-bound portfolio, unaware that she was surrounded by the wreckage of her own happiness. And then, in a moment that would be replayed in Forrester family lore for generations, Daphne stood up. "Ivy," Daphne said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "can you tell us about the inspiration behind the Hidden Truth pendant? The one with the compartment behind the gemstone." Ivy's smile flickered. "It's a design concept about secrets kept close to the heart." "Why do you ask?" "Because I think you understand secrets better than most," Daphne replied. The room went silent. Ridge set down his pen. Eric leaned forward in his chair. Steffi's eyes narrowed, her instincts as a Forrester heir telling her that something significant was about to occur. Electra looked up from her sketches, confusion knitting her brow. "Ivy," Daphne continued, her voice gaining strength, "I need to ask you something. And I need you to answer honestly, because what I'm about to say affects the future of this family and the future of this company. Do you have a letter written by Electra addressed to Will Spencer? A letter that never reached its intended recipient?" The silence that followed was the kind of silence that precedes earthquakes. Ivy's face cycled through a rapid succession of emotions: shock, fear, calculation, and finally, a cold, practiced calm. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Daphne. Perhaps you've been spending too much time on your creative writing rather than your actual job responsibilities." Daphne did not flinch. "Then you won't mind if I look at the leather journal you keep in your desk. The one with the gold monogram. The one I saw you putting Electra's letter into 3 weeks ago." The color drained from Ivy's face. Ridge rose from his chair, his expression darkening with dawning comprehension. "Ivy," he said, his voice the controlled calm of a man who has learned to contain his rage, "open your desk." What followed was a slow-motion car crash that no one in the room could look away from. Ivy's hands shook as she retrieved the journal from her desk drawer. She held it against her chest for a long moment, as if she could somehow protect the contents through sheer will. But Ridge Forrester had not built a fashion empire by accepting refusals. He extended his hand, and after a moment that stretched into eternity, Ivy placed the journal in his palm. Ridge opened it slowly. Inside, pressed between the pages of what was supposed to be a professional notebook, was a single sheet of folded paper. He unfolded it. He read it. And then he looked up at Electra with eyes that held a world of pain. "Electra," Ridge said quietly, "this is your handwriting. This is a letter to Will. And it's dated from before your breakup." The sound that came out of Electra Forrester was not a word or a scream. It was something more primal, a whimper of recognition, of betrayal, of a world suddenly turned upside down. She crossed the room in 3 steps and took the letter from Ridge's hand. She read her own words, words she had poured out in a moment of desperate vulnerability, words she had believed were ignored and rejected. She traced the familiar loops of her handwriting, the confessions of fear and love, the pleas for understanding. And then she turned to face her aunt. "You," Electra whispered. "You did this. You took this. You let me believe he didn't care. You let me believe I was alone. You." Her voice broke, and with it, the last thread of her composure. "I loved you. I trusted you. You were all I had when I came here, and you took my letter. You took my choice. You took my life." Ivy's composure finally cracked. "I was protecting you," she burst out, her voice rising to a pitch that made Steffi flinch. "Will Spencer was using you. He was living with another woman. He was helping a friend." Electra screamed, her voice echoing off the glass walls of the executive suite. "He was being kind. And you made me think he was betraying me. You made me think I was crazy for still loving him. You made me." She stopped, her hand flying to her mouth as another realization crashed over her. The picture. The selfie. "I never posted that picture. I never posted it, Ivy. It was you. You took my phone. You destroyed my relationship, and you made it look like I was the one who moved on." The pieces were falling into place now, the full scope of Ivy's manipulation revealing itself like a photograph developing in chemical baths. Steffi was the first to articulate what everyone was thinking. The social media post. The one that made Will think Electra was with RJ. Ivy, did you post that from Electra's phone? Ivy's silence was her confession. Ridge's face, already hard, turned to stone. Ivy Forrester, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You are fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. You will have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings, and then you will never set foot in this company again.